Hello, everyone. It's Steve Melito from Go Natural Education. I'm here with Steve Ellingson, a professor of sociology at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. He's the author of Planting with Purpose: How Farmers Create a Resilient Food Landscape. Planting with Purpose examines the local food movement and is based on interviews with over 50 people from 45 different farms, restaurants, agricultural nonprofits, and local food retailers in central New York. Steve, welcome to Go Natural Education.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell me, as a sociology professor, how did you decide to write Planting with Purpose?
Oh, let's see. The short answer I had a student who was doing a year-long research project about organic and local agriculture and asked me to be her supervisor. And I was kind of a foodie already. I should say before I came to Hamilton, I was in Berkeley,
Okay,
where every day was like cornucopia of food, farmers markets everywhere. And it's like the West Coast foodie heaven.
sure.
Um, and then I came here and there was like, three farmers selling things at the Clinton Farmers Market and and then in about that was '04 and about I don't know, maybe '08, '09, I started noticing more and more farmers and CSAs popping up and people selling grass-fed beef and free-range chicken. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Um, so I got involved, but through the student who, so I'm reading everything she's reading,
Okay.
and got really intrigued. And at the time, I was working on a book about religious environmentalism. So I was kind of percolating these ideas. I read all this stuff, started teaching about food, and then finished the book. And I thought, wow, I think I'm going to study food because there's like farm to table restaurants now, Taylor and the Cook, and whatnot. And that's how I decided. And Central New York's an interesting case because it's not where you would expect a thriving local food system to exist. We just don't have the population.
Okay.
We don't have the growing season that you might in a more temperate climate. This is dairy land. I mean, the dairy is the biggest agricultural, sector, at least in central New York,
Sure.
right? And yet, more and more small farms, CSAs. How did this happen? So I was really intrigued by how did a kind of growing, developing local food system get started and then flourish here, where one might not expect it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy that you wrote the book and congratulations on
Oh,
its
thank you.
publication. So there's growing interest in local foods in the US, and that's obviously something that you just spoke about. Why do you think that is?
Um, Food scares, for one. I think
Okay.
the the re- almost routine nature of food recalls, salmonella, like whether it's beef or vegetables. I mean, there was just a thing about cucumbers this summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it sensitized people. It makes national news. Um, and because of our distribution system, you're not safe. I mean, the cucumbers are coming, or the lettuce, or the hamburgers are national, right? So I think there's a sense of wanting some degree of greater food security about the safety of the food. That would be one, I think, one reason.
Okay.
I think there's a growing interest in um, health and nutrition among the middle class, kind of like and so I think there's a interest more in knowing where your food comes from and knowing that it's not just empty calories. It actually contains, I shouldn't say empty calories, contains the micronutrients that we might expect out of organic, or at least kind of organic like. A lot of the CSAs in Central New York are not organic, but they rely on organic methods. They're just not certified. Um,
Right. That's an
and
obstacle.
yeah, because of the cost involved, and the market doesn't demand it here. Right. as it does in, say, Ithaca or Hudson
Sure.
Valley. Right?
Sure.
There is like, I don't have any, I don't know if this is true, but food television and the new star power of chefs. I was just reading Michael Pollan's book Cooking,
Okay.
and it starts out by him talking about how we spend more time watching food television than we do cooking. Right? And so I think there's a great interest in food, kind of, and some scholars will argue that the U.S. is finally developing kind of a culinary culture, right? Akin to what has developed in Europe.
Okay.
And so there may be some greater interest in kind of local food. Um, the early CSA literature talked about like the kind of interest in knowing your farmer and developing a community. And yet today, most people use CSAs as an extension of the supermarket more than as kind of like a local community where they bond over agriculture and food and cooking and nature, right?
Sure. So in your book, you also talked about a moral dimension to small scale farming, if I can use that term.
Yeah,
Could you
yeah, yeah.
speak to that a bit?
Oh, sure. So one of the farmers I interviewed, is one of the few organic farmers, talked about. I remember he said, there are no six-figure farmers in our area. We're not making money on this, right?
Right.
So the economics are not driving, right, the desire to grow food and to establish farms, whether it's animal or kind of fruit and vegetable. And so as I pressed in the interviews, people kept talking about the environment and sustainability, like preserving, expanding biodiversity, protecting watersheds, improving soil health, right? So there was kind of a package around kind of environmentalist motivations. Um, there were people who talked about family, right? So I kind of had like three kind of groups. One were like novices, often recent college grads who kind of almost like a back to the land kind of thing from like the 1970s.
Sure.
Then there were the returners. They had grown up on a farm, left, tried something else, and came back, and now have taken over the family farm. And then there are those who actually stayed and are like second, third, fourth generation farmers. And it was that last group in particular that talked about kind of holding on to the family legacy.
Mhm.
And there's also some of the farmers talked about stewardship and kind of a more old fashioned. In fact, one talked about husbandry, and that was the term he used. And he talked about how, his dad taught him and his grandfather to understand the land by smell and by taste and by sight. And he said, I can go out in the field and I can pick up a handful of dirt and I can smell it and taste it and I can tell you exactly what minerals are missing. Like I really know the
Yeah.
land, right? And like I'm going to grow this. He grew a couple heirloom varieties, not because they made money, but because he wanted to hold on to the seed and keep preserving that. So he had kind of like the seed saver orientation as well as kind of like I'm part of this generations of farmers who have taken care of the land, right? So that was, I
Right.
think, part of it. I remember a CSA farmer talked about how it is the most fulfilling thing they do. A couple of them actually said this. I get to spend my day growing food that keeps people nourished and healthy. What
Hmm.
what better way to do? So there's kind of like almost like a service orientation, right? I'm doing something really positive with my life, and I'm helping the community or the people in the community.
That's great. In your book also, there was a section, a couple pages about what the word local means in the
Okay.
context of food. How do you define it? I mean, local could be next door, next town over, next county over.
So yeah, I know I don't actually in the book,
Okay,
but
okay,
so some of the chefs I talk to have to have a more expanded definition of local,
okay.
because if you want to serve New York wine, you're going to have to go to the Finger Lakes or Long Island, right, for example, right? Or but I'm not wedded to like 100-mile radius, which is a familiar kind of thing. Um, but I think of it as, you know, if you think of, I think the book I use like basically Fort Plain to like the edge, like Madison County, right? As
Okay.
like the unit. I can't remember which county Fort Plain is in, right? So that to me is relatively local, just 8, 9 county area.
Okay, sure.
But I can get to Fort Plain in what, an hour or so.
Okay.
I
Okay.
can get to the edge of Madison County in 45 minutes. So, if I actually took to cut my map out and I drew that circle, it might be 100 miles. But um, I don't think of Buffalo as local.
Right. Right.
Although I know that there is a CSA's in the Adirondack Park area, and they run trucks to Rochester, right? And so, is that local? Well,
The matter of debate, I guess.
yeah. It's hard to pin that down. When I would go to, I would my first year doing it, I hung out at farmers market a lot, um, and it almost at every market, when I'd chat up the farmers, and one of them would say, "You see that guy? It's a truck farmer. Those peaches, we don't got peaches in New York in June, right? Those are
Right.
from Pennsylvania or south, right? So like they were like really honed in on who was selling local and who was not selling local. And I think they had a kind of like a almost a state orientation to local,
Sure, sure.
which
And that makes sense as
and
well.
New York State has done a pretty good job of like setting up like the Buy New York, like the New York food beverage trails, and right. So I think that might also have got us thinking about New York State as our local market.
Right. So who do you think is most likely to buy local foods? Is there a demographic or economic profile? And I know from experience, having gone to Colgate years ago, that
Yes.
Madison County is one of the poorest counties in New York State outside of the Adirondacks. So
Yeah.
how does all that fit together?
The white middle class.
Okay.
So middle to upper middle class. Although when you actually the vegetables themselves, their price is comparable to what you would get at a local supermarket.
Mhm.
It's the meat that is far more expensive. Um,
Okay.
um, but the Oneida County Market, which is in downtown Utica, the train station, um, they've struggled to bring in local Utican residents over the years, right? So people will drive in to the market, but fewer people who live within, say, a 2, 3 mile walk will be coming in
Right, right. And for
market.
those that don't know Utica, it has a food subculture or culture, things like chicken riggies and really
Yes,
delicious things that people in other parts of the country
right,
have never heard
right,
of.
right. And it has a sizable refugee population, from different countries, right? And so one of the challenges is they may not be familiar with they don't see the vegetables they're familiar with from
Right.
their homelands, right? So why would they want to come, right? And so I think there are a number of like community gardens in Utica where they're growing their own. The Somali Bantu population has been renting land to grow their own crops for their community rather than go to the farmers market. So there's interesting ways the refugee communities are growing local food, but it's not marketable. It's for immediate consumption within the community. So it's not convenient. and retail has really struggled, right? I talked to one health food store owner, and he said it's not convenient for the farmers to bring their stuff to us.
Hmm.
It's not cost effective necessarily, and I need consistent inventory. I need to know that every week I'm going to have X number of bundles of lettuce or eggs or chicken and stuff. As you know, you're a farmer. Stuff happens,
Stuff happens.
and
It rains more than you
it,
like, or
and
whatever. Too hot,
if
too
it's
cold, whatever.
and if it's not perfect, which often, if you know, I often don't get perfect vegetables at my CSA. It tastes great, but it may not look perfect, right? Um,
Right.
so I think that also deters um, a wider range, right, of local agriculture being purchased by
Sure, sure.
residents in the area.
That's how we got all those beautiful apples in the supermarket that just don't taste like much of anything, right?
No, 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 they don't. I grew up in Washington State, and I'm kind of embarrassed that like this once pioneering apple kind of center only produces tasteless apples now.
So, what are some of the challenges that the small scale farmers you spoke with face?
Scale,
Okay.
right? So um, they may want to expand, but they can't afford it.
Hmm.
May not be able to afford it financially, but also time wise, right? Very few of the farmers that I interviewed, and I'm not saying I interviewed everyone. Um, they're doing most of the work themselves. They may hire a high school student or an
Hmm.
intern, but for the most part, they're actually doing the work themselves. And they actually have the labor market itself is not great. Hard, it's hard work.
Yeah,
And getting people to commit to doing it is at not necessarily high wages. Um, and so I think so, just I want to grow. I want to go from 3 acres to 8 acres, but I can't. I can't plant it all. I can't weed it all. I can't bring it all in, let alone. And I don't have time to sell it all. Right. Right. So yeah, that's one thing. I think the other is if they want to expand, they're not sure where the market is.
right.
Oh, I think everyone talked about we've reached our low hanging fruit. We got the foodies, we got the middle class population who are interested in local food, and that's it. And I don't know where else we're going to get them, right?
Right.
And as a farmer, well, you're probably 24/7. Right? And now you got to go and like find a new market, and you got to market to them, and you got to educate them, right? So I think that's the other problem is like you don't have enough time in the day as a farmer to do all the things you need to do in order to actually expand the market.
Right. And you may have to build a website and integrate e-commerce, and all of a sudden those things aren't outside anymore.
Yeah,
They're in front of a
yeah,
screen.
right. Although I think one of the things that has happened here, there's a Hamilton alum who started a online farmers market, local food in Mohawk Valley,
Okay.
and and I don't. I think everyone was surprised it worked, but it actually provides. It's a really great model for how local farmers can get predictable, consistent um, market base, right? So they always know exactly how much they're going to need to produce. Um, it's all electronic, right? So there's and it's I think it's grown. It used to be just a handful of Clinton residents, and
Some
now
of the
it's
farmers have talked
much
about
much
they simply don't want to grow up there.
larger,
They're
and it runs
happy
year
with the
round.
size
And
and
I think it has
of
encouraged
their
farmers to
farms with
expand their
the
growing
number of
season.
subscribers they have or the number of farmers markets they attend.
And as you know, a farmer's market, that's a day long, that's a day commitment,
It
right?
is. And if it's on a Saturday and you have a day job, that's a day that you can't spend farming.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
challenges on your time.
yeah.
Sure.
And so if you're doing 2 or 3 farmers markets, who's on the farm?
Mhm.
So we don't have very good infrastructure in terms of like food hubs, and we don't have a very robust institutional market, right? Right, that would expand. So is MVHS buying a lot of local produce? Are the Colgates and the Hamiltons and the SUNYs of the of the region buying local produce? Small amounts, I bet.
Right, right.
Um, so I think there's potential, but the closest food hub is Syracuse Regional Market, and there's probably something in Albany.
Right. And you got to drive a little while to get to both spots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. So with all these challenges in your research, what sustains these farmers? What keeps them going, knowing that you're not going to get rich, probably?
yeah, I think part of it is it's a meaningful life.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's really fulfilling. They're all in various ways. They talk about, and I think in the book I use the term enchantment. There's
Okay.
like this almost magic um, when you watch things grow. Um, One guy told me a story about he came back, took over the parents' farm. He had been like in, I don't know, auto sales, or he was in sales of some sort. And he was living out of state someplace. Um, and he Parents were too old to farm and ill, and he took it over, and he's figuring out what's wrong with the soil, and like the puzzle to like, how do I make this soil fertile again?
Hmm.
And he does, and he starts growing these amazing vegetables, and he's growing beets, this little girl and her mom walk up to him at the farmer's market someplace, and the little girl asks him what the beets are, and he explains, and his mom goes, she'll never eat them. He goes, look, here, take them home, try them. If they're not the best beets you've ever had, if your little girl doesn't love them, you know, that's not a problem. I'm not going to charge anything. Next week she comes back and says, oh my gosh, she loved them. Can I have some more? So I think that kind of there is a feedback mechanism in farming, whether it's literally watching the things grow, seeing you overcome adversity. You think about droughts and hail and weather and pests, and you're somehow able to not only survive but thrive through that. To having someone like gush over what you have produced and let you know that that's the best chicken you like. Oh, that's chicken that actually tastes like chicken, or those are the
Right.
great meats, or that kind of thing. So there's an emotional um, payback to this, as well as that sense that they are making the world better.
Yeah. You had mentioned that farmer ran into some poor soil health conditions. Did you find that was a frequent problem among the folks you spoke with, that they needed to regenerate the soil?
Um, Not all. I can think of one farmer who had purchased bottomland,
Okay.
so they were in good shape. But our area in kind of some of Oneida County, heavy clay
Hmm.
soil, and some iron mines. So a lot of iron in the soil. And so learning how to farm in this really heavy, when it's wet, it's mud, it is just slippery and hard to work with. And when it's dry, it's like a rock.
Right.
Um, and I think some of the farmers were concerned about the use of fertilizers, and so trying to find alternatives and um, trying to figure out cover cropping, and crop rotation. And so I think they're like, I think they've recognized that some of the areas are not great. Some of them have been over-farmed, right? And they've
Sure.
taken over, and they've been a lot of corn for silage. And you know what corn, well, you know what corn does to the soil, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that they are quite aware. And because it's heavy clay, at least in our area, around kind of this part of Oneida County, you got to do a lot of drainage,
Yeah.
to kind of help get that water out of the soil because it just locks in. Yeah. So one of the farmers talked to me about how he like was a conventional, plow, till and then plow under and then start all over every spring. And he took a class and he decided I'm going to go kind of low till. And in fact, I think there might even be a long quote in the book from this person about how it kind of rejuvenated the soil because it wasn't compacting
Yeah.
it nearly as much, or it was only compacting in a much smaller area. And, these yields were going up. A much more profitable farm when he switched to this low till method. Um,
That's good to hear. So you have some great stories and are a great storyteller yourself.
oh, thank you.
What do you think makes stories about local food so compelling? I mean, people really enjoy this.
We don't know about farming anymore. Like my grandmother grew up on a wheat farm in Eastern Washington, right? I have pictures of, draft horses, yoked together in giant, farm wagons. And most of us, she would tell me stories about, at lunch, I got to go out and kill the 4 chickens and, but I think most of
Yeah.
us, we don't know a farmer. We don't see farmers. The food we get is packaged, right? Everything like very, except for a handful of fruits and vegetables, most of our stuff is, we don't recognize it as coming out of the ground
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
and so I think it's one of the appeals is that it's like new. Oh, people actually do this. So that's what the life of the farm, what farming is all about. And there is, and I think like the growing food culture on television and social media is also encouraged kind of a curiosity about food. Um,
Sure.
right.
Sure.
And they, in some ways, to me, farmers are heroic. When you think about the hours they work, the backbreaking labor, the the time. And I remember talking to the dairy farmer who also made cheese, and like, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're up starting the cheese making process. And then there's a full day of milking and haying and more
Right.
milking and finishing the cheese and sterilizing everything. It's like, that is nuts. I mean, I work hard, but not nearly that hard, right? So there is like almost like an unknown world that local food stories tell us about. Um, and, you know, the whole idea of knowing your farmer, that's one of those local food slogans. There might be some appeal to that,
Sure.
at least to like the foodies of the world. And there is a sensuousness to food, of stories about food, about um, and again that nice notion of enchantment.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I I had never seen a black Angus cow before, steer. And I was doing this interview and it just come rumbling up to the fence. Magnificent beast, giant. And he goes, come on. I go, that's okay.
Right.
He walks out into into the pasture with him, and they're like nuzzling him. And I mean, they really are these massive, hairy, giant cattle. Um, and there's something really magical about that.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
or
We've
to,
become separated from that, as you had said.
yeah, yeah. So that would be my guess. But that
Okay.
would be a really good question to me for start asking people.
Okay. For sure. For sure. So when you farm, hopefully there are some other folks that are working with you, but you can spend a lot of time by yourself. And so the notion of community always comes up. How can people who are part of the local food culture unite and get together to do things to make profitable farming? Is it just a matter of going to farmers markets, or are there other things that they could do?
Well, I think, is it time the issue?
Yeah, for all of us.
Yeah,
Yes.
but so some of the farmers in the study pool resources. So they'll like, we're going to buy compost, and then we're gonna buy a giant, load of compost, and then we'll, share the costs. So there are ways of kind of cost sharing around resources. Um, I think a mentorship program would be
Mhm.
another way for the older farmers, more experienced farmers, to help the newcomers. So to minimize some of that trial by error learning that
Yes.
usually goes on. Yes, you can go take a class at NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, or BOCE, or BOCES or Cornell Cooperative Extension. But I think the one-on-one relationship of mentor to mentee might be another way of kind of, in some ways, giving a boost to the newer, younger farmers, so they can minimize some of the mistakes. I think these online kind of farmers markets, um, where you you're not having to spend all day at the farmers market.
Hmm.
You get your order the day before, you fill it, you bring it in, drop it off at like you make the drive in, drop it off, and go home. So it minimizes those hours you have to spend at the farmer's market. Um, right.
Sure.
And
Sure.
what happens at farmers markets, you don't know how much you're going to sell,
Right.
right? So you may be unpacking a lot on the way home. Right. So I think those might be another way of trying to explore, because this serves a pretty small footprint of the local food market. So, you know, we don't have people from Herkimer or Madison County coming in to Clinton to buy local agriculture through the electronic farmers market. But if there were these throughout, right?
Right. Right.
Retail, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of retail. I think most of the retail haven't made it. In fact, I think all the retail closed during this period I was collecting data.
Okay.
Um, so could we develop a more robust retail operation? Right. So
Did you find that a lot of the farmers were frustrated by their ability to get into retail settings, like stores, supermarkets, other things?
I think they're more frustrated by the restaurants,
Really? Okay.
because chefs change their menus,
Right.
right? Chefs change their minds. And how many tenderloins are there in a cow? What am I going to do with the rest
Hmm.
of the beef? So who's going to be buying all that hamburger or the less choice cuts?
Yes.
Um,
Sure.
and so and so I think in the restaurants, many of them, unless you had a consistent restaurant like a restaurant CSA basically. It just wasn't consistent enough, not predictable enough. So you couldn't count on the restaurant to like, yeah, every month you're going to be ordering X number of, pork product or chicken. Um, I just, my sense from the interviews was I'm overworked, I'm exhausted, I love my life and I love my job. It's just too much work. You know, I'd rather spend my time tending the crops than putting them in a van or a back of a pickup and driving them to
Hmm.
Price Chopper or Hannaford or one of the other supermarket chains. I think and again, if you're growing food on 2 to 3 acres as opposed to 20, you just don't have the volume. And so what's in it for the supermarket chain or the
Right.
retailer? So I think, yeah, I think they were frustrated that the market felt stuck.
Sure, sure. So last question. Here in
Yeah,
the US, we have an industrial scale food system for the most part. If we could get small farmers to have more community and perhaps do some of the things that you've suggested, such as have mentors who can help them avoid some of the painful errors that can happen along the
yeah.
way, would that be enough to change the concentrated food production system?
No. Well, I think you're going to have to go to the federal level,
Okay,
and we've got to get rid of the crop subsidies for some of the like shift monies around, shift resources around
sure.
would be one thing. I think you have to make it easier for the farmers to actually and incentivize them to actually grow more. Um, and I don't know, I'm not very optimistic. I think you could have a more robust local food market, but it's not going to serve everyone and it's not going to replace our industrial food system. Um, I was at the supermarket this morning and guy had a dolly, and I think it was at least 12, maybe 16 boxes of bananas.
Hmm.
And I said, well, that's a load of bananas. He said, yeah, we'll sell this today. 600 pounds. Uh, we are local farmers, especially at these small scales, they're not growing that volume.
600 pounds of anything. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the larger farmers are connected to a system where their food is getting processed and shipped out of state and then packaged and reshipped back in. Um, right. So it's not really, it's kind of local, but it's kind of
Yeah, yeah.
the long commodity chain for, to go from the green beans grown in Oneida County to where we can pick them up at Walmart.
Right, right.
So I don't know enough about dairy because I excluded dairy because that was its own unique agricultural
Sure.
sector. I would think that most milk is local, just given that the system what we have in place. You may not be able to pinpoint which farm it comes from, but I'm guessing that a lot of my milk comes from New York State someplace.
Sure, sure. As opposed to Washington State or California.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. There's an educational component, right? How many of us are willing to eat locally and seasonally? Right? And so if I want my avocado and my tomato in January, our local agriculture can't do it here,
Right.
right?
Or even a
So,
peach in June. It's not going to be a New
or
York State peach.
no, it is not. You know, so and we don't grow a lot of wheat,
Mhm.
So I think I think we could have a larger footprint. Wouldn't it be lovely if we had a significant part of our family food budget went locally, and then we were using the chain supermarket, the industrial food system, for those items we couldn't get, right?
Sure, sure.
But again, that's a pipe dream. You know, we are so wedded to the convenience and surplus, the range of foods that we can get.
Right.
It's hard to imagine. But I think if you could figure out the infrastructure and figure out kind of how to increase volume without breaking the backs of the farmers, and figure out who could educate consumers in an effective way, right? Maybe that's college teachers like me or high schools. Can we get agricultural education, food education into the elementary schools?
Sure, sure. Well,
You
we're also
know,
trying to do some of the go natural education. I think our dream is to have a curriculum someday to be able
yeah.
to introduce and explain these things.
Well, I know that in Alice Water out in Berkeley in Oakland, they developed kind of a school garden but I don't know what the effect has been. Maybe
Hmm.
too early to tell. It's hard to get in our curriculum. It's hard to get that fitted in, given state testing, and all of that. So,
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of mandates for what the schools must do in the time that they
yeah,
do
yeah,
have. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
Well, Steve, thanks for your time here today with
oh,
us.
lovely. I appreciate it.
It's great. And so here at Go Natural Education, we've been talking to Steve Ellingson, a professor of sociology at Hamilton College. He's the author of Planting with Purpose: How Farmers Create a Resilient Food Landscape. The book is published by New York University Press. It's also available on Amazon, and we'll share the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening.